The dust kicked up behind her as she stumbled through the back alley of Lincoln, New Mexico territory, her stomach cramping with a hunger so fierce it made her vision blur at the edges. Kate pressed her hand against the rough wooden wall of the Lucky Dollar Saloon, steadying herself as the world tilted and swayed like she was aboard a ship in a storm, though she had never seen the ocean and likely never would. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread drifted from the kitchen window above, and her mouth watered despite the shame that burned hot in her chest. She had never imagined her life would come to this, reduced to waiting behind a saloon at 22 years old, hoping the cook would toss out something edible rather than scraps fit only for dogs. But 3 weeks without work and 2 days without a proper meal had stripped away most of her pride, leaving only the desperate will to survive another day in this harsh land. The back door swung open with a creak that made her heart leap with hope. A heavy-set woman with flour dusting her apron stepped out, carrying a pail of kitchen waste. She spotted Emma and her expression shifted from surprise to pity, then to something harder, more guarded. "You cannot keep coming here," the cook said, though her voice was not unkind. "Mr. Henderson already told me twice this week to stop giving food to beggars. Says it is bad for business, having folks like you lurking around." "Please," Emma heard herself say, hating the tremor in her voice. "Just anything you were going to throw out anyway." "I will not trouble you again after today, I promise." The cook hesitated, glancing back toward the kitchen door. "I got half a loaf of bread that went stale yesterday and some beef that is starting to turn. It is not much, but it is all I can spare without losing my position." "Thank you," Emma whispered, fighting back tears that would accomplish nothing. "Thank you so much." The woman disappeared back inside, and Emma leaned against the wall, closing her eyes against the afternoon sun that beat down mercilessly on the dusty town. She had arrived in Lincoln 6 months ago with such different hopes. The letter from her cousin had promised work at the general store, a room to stay in, and the chance for a new beginning after her father's death had left her alone and penniless back in Missouri. But when she had finally made the long, difficult journey west, she had discovered that her cousin had married and moved to California, and nobody in Lincoln seemed to know or care where she had gone. The general store had no work for her. Neither did the hotel, the livery stable, or any of the respectable establishments in town. The saloon had offered her a position, but not the kind that would let her keep her dignity or her virtue, and even hungry and desperate, Emma had not fallen that far yet. The back door opened again, and the cook emerged with a cloth bundle. She pressed it into Emma's hands, her expression troubled. "There is a rancher who comes through town sometimes, name of Jacob Fletcher. He has a spread about 10 miles west of here, runs cattle and breeds horses. I heard tell he is looking for help, someone who can cook and keep house. Might be worth asking if you can find him." "A rancher?" Emma's voice cracked with uncertainty. "I have no experience with ranch work. He is not looking for a ranch hand girl. He needs someone to manage the house side of things. His wife passed 2 years back, and from what I hear, the place is falling apart without a woman's touch. He has been making do, but a man alone cannot run a household and a ranch both." The cook glanced back nervously. "Now go on, before someone sees me out here talking to you." Emma clutched the bundle to her chest and hurried away down the alley, her worn boots kicking up little clouds of dust with each step. She found a shaded spot behind an abandoned wagon at the edge of town and unwrapped the cloth with trembling fingers. The bread was indeed stale, and the beef had a slightly off smell, but it was food, and she ate it with a gratitude that made her throat tight. As she chewed the tough bread, she thought about what the cook had said. A rancher looking for household help. It might be her only chance. She spent the rest of the afternoon asking around town, trying to gather information about Jacob Fletcher without attracting too much attention or suspicion. The general store owner, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, told her that Fletcher came to town every few weeks for supplies. The blacksmith mentioned that Fletcher was known as a fair man, honest in his dealings, and he ran one of the better operations in the territory. An old-timer sitting outside the livery stable said Fletcher was in town today, in fact, having a late lunch at the saloon. Emma's heart pounded as she considered her options. She could not go into the saloon itself, not as a woman alone with any reputation left to protect. But perhaps she could wait, catch him as he came out, speak to him then. It was bold, perhaps too bold, but what choice did she have? She had nowhere to sleep tonight except the small cave outside of town where she had been hiding her few belongings, and even that was not safe. Just last week, another drifter had tried to rob her there, and only her screams and a lucky blow with a rock had driven him off. She positioned herself across the street from the saloon, trying to look inconspicuous while keeping her eyes on the entrance. Men came and went, some already drunk despite the afternoon hour, others looking like cowboys or merchants going about their business. She was about to give up, thinking perhaps her information had been wrong, when a man emerged who immediately caught her attention. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that needed a trim and a well-worn hat that had seen many seasons of sun and rain. His clothes were dusty from travel but of good quality, the kind a successful rancher might wear. He had a strong, weathered face, the kind shaped by hard work and harsh weather, but there was something about his eyes, even from this distance, that seemed kind. He carried himself with quiet confidence, not the swagger of a man trying to prove something, but the solid assurance of someone who knew his place in the world and was comfortable with it. Emma took a deep breath and stepped off the wooden sidewalk, starting across the street toward him. Her legs felt weak, and she realized too late that she had moved too quickly after eating. The world tilted sideways and she stumbled, going down on one knee in the dust of the street. Humiliation washed over her, hot and terrible, and she struggled to get back to her feet. "Madam, are you all right?" The voice was deep, concerned, and when she looked up, the tall rancher was standing right beside her, his hand extended to help her up. "I am fine," she managed, though they both knew it was a lie. She took his hand because she had no choice, and he pulled her to her feet with easy strength. Up close, she could see the details the distance had hidden. His eyes were a deep brown, warm and intelligent, with small lines at the corners that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun. He had a scar along his jawline, faded with time, and his hands were calloused from hard work but clean and careful as he steadied her. "You do not look fine," he said bluntly, but not unkindly. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" The question was so direct that Emma did not have a lie prepared. "This morning," she said, though they both knew she meant the scraps behind the saloon. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw recognition dawn in his eyes, not of her specifically, but of her situation. He had seen desperate people before, knew the signs of someone at the end of their rope. "Are you Jacob Fletcher?" she asked quickly before her courage could fail. "I heard you might be looking for someone to help manage your household." His eyebrows rose slightly. "News travels fast. I only mentioned it to the store owner this morning." He paused, still studying her face. "What is your name?" "Emma Kate. Emma Kensington. I arrived in Lincoln 6 months ago from Missouri. I can cook, clean, sew, manage accounts, and I am a hard worker. I was raised to run a proper household, Mr. Fletcher. My circumstances are temporary, but my skills are sound." She said it all in a rush, trying to sound confident despite her ragged appearance. She knew what she must look like to him, a desperate woman with dust on her skirt and hunger in her eyes, making claims about her abilities. But it was all true. Her father had been a schoolteacher, and her mother had run their household with precision and grace. Emma had learned well before illness had taken them both. Jacob Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, and Emma felt her hope starting to crumble. Then he said something that surprised her completely. "I am about to have dinner at the hotel restaurant. The Saloon serves decent food, but today I feel like something better. Would you join me, Miss Kensington? We can discuss the position over a proper meal." Emma stared at him, not quite believing what she had heard. "You want me to have dinner with you? I want to talk to you about the job, and I cannot do that while you are about to fall over from hunger. Besides, my mother raised me to have better manners than to eat in front of a starving woman." There was a hint of humor in his voice, but also sincerity. "What do you say?" Pride warred with desperation, and desperation won as it had been winning for weeks now. "Yes," she said quietly, "thank you." He gestured toward the hotel, a two-story building at the end of the main street with a restaurant on the ground floor that Emma had walked past many times, but never entered. As they walked together, she was acutely aware of how she must look, of the stares they were getting from people on the street. A well-dressed rancher walking with a woman who looked like a vagrant. She kept her head up, trying to maintain what dignity she had left. The restaurant was clean and pleasant, with white tablecloths and actual glass windows. The woman who greeted them, probably the owner's wife, gave Emma a look that could have curdled milk, but Jacob Fletcher's presence commanded respect. He asked for a table by the window, and they were seated despite the woman's obvious disapproval. "I will have the steak dinner," Jacob said to the waitress who appeared, a young girl with suspicious eyes. "And bring the same for the lady with extra bread and potatoes." When the waitress left, Jacob leaned back in his chair and regarded Emma with that same steady, assessing gaze. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Kensington. How does a woman from Missouri end up begging for scraps in New Mexico?" The bluntness should have offended her, but there was no cruelty in it, only honest curiosity. So Emma told him the truth, or most of it. She told him about her parents, about her cousin's letter, about arriving in Lincoln to find herself alone with no prospects and rapidly dwindling funds. She did not tell him about the nights in the cave, or about the man who had attacked her, or about the sheer terror of being completely alone in a harsh land, where a woman without protection was vulnerable in ways that still made her hands shake. He listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When the food arrived, Emma had to force herself not to fall on it like a wild animal. The steak was thick and juicy, cooked perfectly, and the potatoes were swimming in butter. There were green beans, fresh bread, and even a small dish of apple sauce. It was more food than she had seen in weeks, and it took every ounce of willpower to eat slowly, to maintain some semblance of manners. "The job is real," Jacob said after a while, cutting his own steak with precise movements. "My wife Sarah died 2 years ago. Fever took her in 3 days, and by the time we got the doctor out from town, there was nothing he could do." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Emma heard the old pain underneath. "We had been married 8 years, never had children though we wanted them. She ran the household side of the ranch while I handled the cattle and horses. Since she passed, I have been trying to do both, and I am doing neither one well." "I am sorry for your loss," Emma said softly, and meant it. He nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. "The house needs a woman's touch. I need someone who can cook proper meals, keep the place clean, maybe tend a vegetable garden when spring comes. I have 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. They are good men, but they eat like horses and have no sense of organization. Someone needs to keep track of supplies, do the washing, the mending, all the things Sarah used to handle. "I can do all of that," Emma said, meeting his eyes. "I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Fletcher." "I believe you," he said, and she thought he really did. The pay would be room and board plus $30 a month. You would have your own room in the main house, separate from mine and from the bunkhouse. Meals with the family, meaning me and the hands. One day off a week, Sunday, though I would expect you to prepare Sunday dinner before you took your free time. $30 a month. It was more than Emma had dared hope for. With room and board included, she could actually save money, maybe eventually have enough to start a new life somewhere else if things did not work out. Or maybe, if she was very lucky, build a life here. "There is one condition," Jacob continued, his voice serious. "I run a respectable ranch, Miss Kensington. I will not have people gossiping or assuming things that are not true. You would be my employee, nothing more. I will treat you with respect, and I expect the same in return. If you agree to this position, you would be a member of my household under my protection. Anyone who bothered you would answer to me, but your reputation and mine both depend on maintaining proper boundaries. Do you understand?" "Yes," Emma said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. He was offering her not just work, but safety, protection, the chance to sleep without fear, to eat regular meals, to live like a human being again instead of an animal scraping by day to day. "I understand completely, and I agree to your terms." "Good." He pushed back from the table, the meal finished. "I am staying in town tonight and heading back to the ranch tomorrow morning. Do you have belongings you need to collect?" Emma thought of her pitiful bundle hidden in the cave. One spare dress, nearly as worn as the one she was wearing. A hairbrush that had been her mother's, a small Bible, a few other tiny treasures that were all she had left of her old life. "Not much," she admitted. "I can have everything ready by morning. I will meet you at the general store at sunrise. We can pick up some supplies for the ranch, and I will get you some basics you will need. A couple of work dresses, an apron, proper shoes if those boots of yours are as worn out as they look." Emma felt her cheeks burn. "Mr. Fletcher, you do not need to do that. I can manage with what I have until I earn enough to buy my own things." "Consider it an advance against your wages," he said firmly. "I need you ready to work, and you cannot work in rags. It is a business expense, nothing more." The way he said it preserved her dignity, made it sound practical rather than charitable, and Emma was grateful for that. She nodded, accepting his logic even as her throat grew tight with relief and gratitude. Jacob paid for the meal and walked her outside. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" he asked. Emma hesitated, not wanting to lie but also not wanting to admit the truth. But something in his steady gaze made her answer honestly. "I have been staying in a cave outside of town. It is not much, but it keeps the rain off." His jaw tightened and she saw something flash in his eyes, anger perhaps, but not at her. "That is not safe. A woman alone out there, anything could happen." "I know," she said quietly. "But I had no other choice." He was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with something. Finally he said, "I am staying at the boarding house tonight, Mrs. Chen's place on the edge of town. She is a respectable woman, runs a clean establishment. I will pay for a room for you tonight, and you can get a proper rest before the journey tomorrow." "Mr. Fletcher, I cannot accept that. People will talk." "People already talk, Miss Kensington. The question is whether you want to spend your last night in town sleeping in a cave where God knows what could happen to you, or in a clean bed where you will be safe. I am not asking you to compromise anything. Mrs. Chen's boarding house is respectable. You will have your own room with a lock on the door." When he put it that way, Emma knew she would be a fool to refuse. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness." "Work hard, do your job well, and we will call it even," he said simply. "Now come on, let me take you to Mrs. Chen's before it gets full dark." The boarding house was indeed respectable, a neat adobe building with a small garden in front. Mrs. Chen was a tiny Chinese woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She looked Emma up and down, then looked at Jacob Fletcher with a question in her expression. "This is Miss Emma Kensington," Jacob said. "She will be working at my ranch as my housekeeper. I need a room for her tonight, something clean and safe." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "I have room at the end of the hall. $5 includes breakfast in the morning." Jacob paid without hesitation and received a key in return. Mrs. Chen handed it to Emma, not to Jacob, and Emma appreciated that small gesture of respect. "Breakfast at 6, Mrs. Chen said. "Water for washing is in the pitcher in your room. Privy is out back." "Thank you," Emma said, clutching the key like it was made of gold. Jacob touched the brim of his hat. "I will see you at the general store at sunrise, Miss Kensington. Get some rest." He left, and Emma followed Mrs. Chen up the stairs to her room. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window that looked out over the garden. After Mrs. Chen left, Emma locked the door and simply stood there for a long moment, taking it in. A real room, a real bed, safety. She retrieved her bundle from the cave just as the last light was fading, moving quickly through the darkness with her heart pounding at every sound. Back in the boarding house, she locked herself in her room and used the water in the pitcher to wash as thoroughly as she could manage. She washed her spare dress as well, hanging it over the chair to dry. Then she lay down on the bed, still wearing her chemise, and pulled the clean blanket over herself. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe enough to truly sleep. No fear of men finding her in the cave. No worry about wild animals or snakes. Just the soft bed, the clean room, and the knowledge that tomorrow her life would change. She did not know what awaited her at the Fletcher ranch, but it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. Morning came with pale light through the window, and the smell of coffee and frying bacon drifting up from downstairs. Emma, dressed in her cleaner dress, brushed her hair as best she could without a mirror, and went down to breakfast. Mrs. Chen served her eggs, bacon, and fresh tortillas without comment, and Emma ate slowly, savoring every bite. At sunrise, she was standing outside the general store with her small bundle when Jacob Fletcher arrived on a large bay horse, leading a gentle-looking mare behind him. "Morning, Miss Kensington," he greeted her. "That mare is for you. Her name is Rosie, and she is as steady as they come. The ranch is 10 miles out, too far to walk." Emma stared at the horse, then at him. "I should tell you I have not ridden much. My father kept a horse for his buggy, but I was never much of a rider. Rosie will take care of you. She knows the way home." He dismounted and helped her secure her bundle to the saddle, then held the stirrup for her to mount. It was awkward, and she was grateful for the fullness of her skirt that preserved her modesty. Once she was settled, he swung back onto his own horse with easy grace. "We will take it slow," he said. "Let me know if you need to stop and rest." The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, was just opening up. Jacob bought a long list of supplies including flour, sugar, coffee, salt, beans, and dried goods. He also, as promised, purchased fabric for 2 new work dresses, a sturdy apron, and a pair of boots that actually fit Emma's feet properly. She tried to protest the expense, but he waved her off. "You cannot work barefoot," he said reasonably, "and those boots you have are about to fall apart. This is practical, nothing more." With the supplies packed onto Jacob's horse and a smaller bundle tied to Emma's saddle, they set off as the sun cleared the horizon. The town of Lincoln fell away behind them, and the landscape opened up into the vast, harsh beauty of New Mexico territory. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the morning sky. Scrub brush dotted the sandy soil, and here and there, hardy grasses grew in patches. It was a hard land, Emma thought, but there was something magnificent about it too. They rode in comfortable silence for the first mile or so. Then Jacob said, "Tell me about Missouri. What was it like there?" So Emma told him about the small town where she had grown up, about the school where her father taught, and the small house where they had lived. She told him about the changing seasons, the green summers and the cold winters, so different from this desert landscape. She told him about her mother's garden, always full of flowers, and her father's love of books. "Sounds like a good childhood," Jacob said when she finished. "It was. I did not appreciate it enough at the time, but it was." Emma paused. "What about you, Mr. Fletcher? Have you always been a rancher, born to it?" he said. "My father had a ranch in Texas. I learned the trade from him, worked cattle drives when I was younger. Saved up my money and came to New Mexico territory about 12 years ago. Bought land when it was cheap and built the ranch from nothing. Met Sarah in Santa Fe when I was there buying breeding stock. She was a merchant's daughter, city-raised, but she took to ranch life better than I ever expected." There was affection in his voice when he spoke of his late wife, but also acceptance. The grief was still there, Emma sensed, but it had softened into something he could live with. "You ever think about going back to Texas?" she asked. "Sometimes. I have a brother there, still working my father's ranch, but this is my home now. I built it with my own hands, every fence post and barn board. The land is harsh, but it is mine. Or at least," he added with a slight smile, "it will be mine once I finish paying off the bank." The journey took most of the morning, with one stop at a small stream to water the horses and rest for a few minutes. Emma was grateful for the break, as her legs were already aching from the unaccustomed riding. But Rosie was indeed gentle, and the mare seemed to sense Emma's inexperience, moving with steady, careful steps. Finally, they crested a low rise and Jacob gestured ahead. "There it is, the Fletcher Ranch." Emma looked down into the valley below and felt her breath catch. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a long adobe structure with a covered porch running along the front. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, a bunkhouse set apart from the main house, and various other outbuildings. The land stretched out in all directions, dotted with grazing cattle. A creek ran through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided precious shade. It was rough and wild, but she could see the care that had gone into building it, the thought and planning. "It is beautiful," she said honestly. "It is home," Jacob replied simply. As they rode down toward the house, Emma saw 3 men emerge from the barn, watching their approach with curious eyes. These would be the ranch hands Jacob had mentioned, she realized, and suddenly she felt nervous again. What would they think of her? Would they resent her presence? Jacob reined in his horse near the house and dismounted, then helped Emma down. Her legs were shaky and she stumbled slightly. His hand steadied her elbow until she found her balance. "Boys, come meet Miss Kensington," Jacob called. "She is going to be managing the household from now on." The 3 men approached, and Emma studied them carefully. The first was young, probably not much older than 20, with red hair and freckles. The second was middle-aged, weathered and bow-legged from years in the saddle. The third was older, gray-haired with kind eyes and a limp that suggested an old injury. "This is Tommy, Pete, and Charlie," Jacob introduced them. "They keep this place running." "Pleased to meet you, miss," Tommy said, his voice eager. "Will you be doing the cooking?" because no offense to the boss, but his cooking could use some help. The other men laughed, and even Jacob smiled. That is what I keep hearing. Miss Kensington, why do not I show you the house while the boys unload these supplies? Emma followed him up the porch steps and through the front door into the house. Inside, it was dim and cooler than outside, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. The front room was large with a fireplace, a few pieces of sturdy furniture, and windows that let in good light. But it was also dusty, clearly neglected, with cobwebs in the corners and a general air of abandonment. I know it needs work, Jacob said, looking around with something like embarrassment. I have been meaning to clean it properly, but I never seem to find the time. Emma saw past the dust and disorder to the potential underneath. It is a good house, she said. Solid, it just needs attention. He showed her the rest of the main floor. A kitchen with a large stove and good counter space, a dining area with a long table, and a small room that served as an office. Upstairs, there were 4 bedrooms. One was clearly Jacob's, with a large bed and personal belongings scattered about. Another had been his wife's sewing room, now dusty and unused. The third was set up as a guest room with a simple bed and dresser. The fourth, at the end of the hall, would be Emma's. This was Sarah's favorite room, Jacob said quietly, opening the door. She liked the view of the creek and the morning light. I have not touched it since she passed. I thought you might want to use it. The room was lovely, with windows on 2 walls and a beautiful wooden bed frame. There was a dresser with an attached mirror, a washstand, and a braided rug on the floor. Like the rest of the house, it was dusty from disuse, but Emma could see how nice it had been, how carefully chosen each piece was. It is perfect, Emma said softly. Thank you. Jacob nodded, looking relieved. I will let you get settled. Unpack your things, wash up if you like. There is a pump in the kitchen for water. When you are ready, maybe you could make us all some lunch. I am sure the boys would appreciate a good meal. Of course, Emma said. Give me an hour. After he left, Emma stood alone in her new room and let herself feel the full weight of her changing circumstances. Just yesterday, she had been begging for scraps behind a saloon. Today, she had her own room in a ranch house, a job with fair pay, and the protection of a decent man. It seemed almost too good to be true, and a small voice in the back of her mind warned her not to get too comfortable, not to trust too much. But for now, in this moment, she would allow herself to feel grateful. She unpacked her meager belongings, placing them carefully in the dresser drawers. The room swallowed them up, all her worldly possessions taking up less than 1 drawer. But she had the fabric for new dresses, and she would sew them in the evenings. She would make curtains for the windows, tend the house until it gleamed, prove herself worthy of this second chance. After washing her face and hands at the pump in the kitchen, Emma explored the pantry and cellar. Jacob had not exaggerated about needing household management. The storage was disorganized, with supplies scattered randomly and no clear system. But there was plenty of food, more than enough to make a good meal. She found potatoes, onions, dried beef, and some canned tomatoes. There was flour for biscuits and coffee for brewing. She set to work with a will, stoking the stove and beginning to prepare a proper dinner. It felt good to work in a kitchen again, to create something useful with her hands. As she peeled potatoes and sliced onions, she found herself humming, something she had not done in months. An hour later, she called the men in for lunch. They came hungry and curious, crowding into the dining room with their hats in their hands. Emma served beef stew thick with vegetables, fresh biscuits that were still warm from the oven, and strong coffee. The men ate in appreciative silence, and when Tommy asked for a third helping, Emma felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Miss Kensington, Jacob said when the meal was finished. "That was the best food I've had in 2 years. If you can cook like that regularly, you are going to make 4 very happy men." The others murmured agreement, and Emma felt herself blush with pleasure. "It is just basic cooking, nothing fancy." "Maybe so, but it is a far sight better than burnt beans and hardtack," Pete said with feeling. "Madam, I think you are going to work out just fine." After lunch, Emma began the enormous task of cleaning the house. She started with the kitchen, scrubbing every surface until it shone. She organized the pantry properly, making a list of what supplies were running low. She swept and mopped the floors, washed the windows, and beat the dust from the rugs. By evening, she was exhausted but satisfied. The main floor of the house looked transformed. As the sun set, she prepared dinner, another simple but hearty meal of fried potatoes, eggs, and bacon. The men ate with the same appreciation as before, and after they left to tend the evening chores, Emma cleaned up the kitchen and finally allowed herself to stop. Jacob found her sitting on the porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. "You did good work today," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "The house already feels different." "There is still much to do," Emma said, "but I made a start." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Horses whickering in the corral, cattle lowing in the distance, crickets beginning their evening song. "I want you to know," Jacob said eventually, "that I will not take advantage of this situation. I know you were desperate when I met you, and I know that puts you in a vulnerable position. But I meant what I said in town. You are my employee under my protection. I will treat you with respect, and I expect the same from the boys. If anyone bothers you or makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately." Emma turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity in his face. "I believe you, Mr. Fletcher, and I am grateful, more than I can say." "Jacob," he said. "Out here we do not stand much on formality. You can call me Jacob, at least when we are not in town." "Then you should call me Emma," she replied. He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer, more approachable. "Emma it is, then. Welcome to the Fletcher Ranch, Emma. I hope you will be happy here." As she prepared for bed that night in her clean room with its comfortable bed, Emma thought about happiness. It seemed like a distant concept, something that belonged to her old life before loss and hardship had stripped it away. But maybe, just maybe, she could find something like it here. Maybe she could build a new life in this harsh, beautiful land, working for this decent man who had given her a seat at his table when she had been begging for scraps. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Emma rose before dawn to make breakfast for the men, then spent her mornings cleaning and organizing different parts of the house. She cooked hearty lunches and dinners, gradually working her way through the supplies in the pantry and making notes about what they would need on the next trip to town. She washed clothes and linens, mended torn shirts and pants, and began sewing her new dresses in the evenings. The ranch hands quickly grew to appreciate her presence. Tommy in particular seemed to take to her, always eager to help carry water or chop wood for the stove. Pete was quieter, but he thanked her gravely for every meal and every mended shirt. Charlie, the oldest, reminded her of her father somehow, with his gentle manner and thoughtful silences. But it was Jacob who occupied more and more of her thoughts as the weeks passed. She found herself watching for him during the day, noticing when he rode in from checking the cattle, paying attention to whether he seemed tired or troubled. In the evenings, after dinner, he often stayed to talk with her while she cleaned up the kitchen or worked on her sewing. They talked about everything and nothing, about the ranch and the territory, about books they had read and places they had been. She learned that he was intelligent and well-spoken despite his rough appearance, that he had a dry sense of humor that surprised her into laughter, that he carried his responsibilities with a quiet strength that she found deeply attractive. It was that last thought that worried her. She was his employee, nothing more. He had made that clear from the beginning, and she had no right to feel anything beyond gratitude and professional respect. But her heart seemed not to care about what rights she had. When he smiled at her across the dinner table, her pulse quickened. When their hands accidentally touched as she passed him a cup of coffee, she felt a spark that had nothing to do with static electricity. She was falling for him, slowly but surely, and she had no idea what to do about it. The first month passed, then the second. Spring arrived, bringing warmer days and the promise of new growth. Emma planted a vegetable garden beside the house, working the soil with a determination that matched everything else she did. She bought chickens from a neighboring ranch, setting up a small coop and collecting fresh eggs each morning. The house continued to transform under her care, becoming not just clean but welcoming, filled with small touches that made it a home rather than just a dwelling. One evening in late April, Jacob came in from the range looking troubled. Emma was preparing dinner and she glanced up as he entered the kitchen. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. He hesitated, then said, "We have a problem. Pete found tracks on the north section today, boot prints and evidence of camping. Someone has been on the property watching the cattle. Could be nothing, just a drifter passing through, or it could be rustlers scouting us out." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "Are we in danger?" "I do not think so. Not immediately. But I am going to have the boys take turns on night watch for a while, just to be safe. I wanted you to know so you would not worry if you heard someone moving around outside at night. Should we send for the sheriff?" "Not yet. We do not have enough evidence and Sheriff Morgan has his hands full in town. But I am keeping my eyes open and I have made sure the boys are armed. We will be careful." That night, Emma found it hard to sleep. Every sound outside made her tense, listening for trouble. When she finally did drift off, her dreams were uneasy, filled with shadows and unseen threats. The next few days were tense. The men rode out armed, and Jacob looked grimmer than Emma had ever seen him. But no further signs of intruders appeared, and gradually the tension began to ease. It was on Sunday, Emma's day off, that things came to a head. She had made a large Sunday dinner as usual, then retired to her room to rest and read. But the afternoon was so beautiful that she could not stay inside. She put on her bonnet and took a walk down by the creek, enjoying the shade of the cottonwood trees and the sound of the water running over rocks. She was so lost in her thoughts that she did not hear the rider approach until it was too late. A man on horseback emerged from the trees, blocking her path back to the house. He was rough-looking, unshaven, with mean eyes and a gun on his hip. "Well now," he said, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "What do we have here? You must be the new housekeeper I heard about." "Pretty thing, are not you?" Emma's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "This is private property, you need to leave." He laughed, a harsh sound. "I do not think so. See, me and my partners have been watching this place. Nice setup Fletcher has here. Good cattle, good horses, and now a pretty woman. We have been trying to figure out the best way to move some of those cattle without getting caught. But maybe we should take you instead. Let Fletcher know we are serious about wanting a cut of his profits." Before Emma could react, he had dismounted and grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. She screamed, loud and piercing, hoping someone at the ranch would hear. But they were far enough from the house that she did not know if her voice would carry. The man slapped her, hard enough to make her ears ring. "Shut up, or I will hit you again, harder." Emma tasted blood in her mouth, but terror gave her strength. She brought her knee up hard between his legs, the way her father had once taught her when she was young. The man howled and loosened his grip, and Emma ran, her skirts tangling around her legs as she fled toward the house. She heard him cursing behind her, heard the sound of him remounting his horse. He was going to run her down, she realized with sick certainty. She could not outrun a horse. But she kept running anyway, desperation lending her speed. Then she heard a shot, sharp and clear in the afternoon air. The man behind her cursed again, and Emma looked back to see Jacob galloping toward them on his bay horse, rifle in hand. He had fired a warning shot, but the next one, she sensed, would not be a warning. The rustler knew it too. He wheeled his horse around and took off in the opposite direction, disappearing into the trees. Jacob reached Emma's side and dismounted in one smooth motion, catching her as her legs finally gave out. "Are you hurt?" His voice was harsh with worry, his hands gentle as he examined her face. "Did he hurt you?" "I am all right," Emma managed, though she was shaking violently. "He grabbed me, hit me once, but I got away." "Oh, Jacob," he said there were others, that they had been watching the ranch. "I know." His face was grim. "Pete spotted them this morning, 3 men camped about 2 miles north. We were getting ready to ride out and confront them when I heard you scream." He pulled her against his chest, and she could feel his heart pounding as hard as her own. "God, Emma, when I heard you scream, I thought my heart would stop." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, and Emma felt something shift between them. This was not an employer comforting an employee. This was something much deeper, much more personal. Finally, Jacob pulled back, though his hands still rested on her shoulders. "Come on, let us get you back to the house. I need to gather the boys and go deal with these rustlers before they cause more trouble." Back at the ranch house, Emma told Tommy, Pete, and Charlie what had happened while Jacob loaded his rifle and checked his handgun. The men's faces were set and angry. "We should have dealt with them sooner," Charlie said grimly. "Should have known they were up to no good." "We are dealing with them now," Jacob said. "Emma, I want you to stay in the house with the doors locked until we get back. Load the shotgun that is in my room and keep it with you. If anyone besides us tries to get in, you shoot first and ask questions later. Understand?" Emma nodded, trying not to show how frightened she was. "Be careful, please." Jacob met her eyes, and for a moment she saw everything he was not saying written plain on his face. "I will, I promise." The men rode out, and Emma locked herself in the house as instructed. She found the shotgun, loaded it with trembling hands, and sat in the kitchen with it across her lap, listening to every sound. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. It was nearly dark when she heard horses approaching. She grabbed the shotgun and moved to the window, relief flooding through her when she saw Jacob and the others riding back. All 4 of them, unharmed. She unlocked the door and stepped out onto the porch. "What happened?" she called as they dismounted. "We found their camp," Jacob said, climbing the porch steps. "They were packing up, probably planning to move on after that one tried to grab you. We had words. They decided it would be healthier to leave the territory entirely. I do not think they will be back. You did not have to shoot anyone." "No," he said, and she heard the relief in his voice. They were not as brave when facing 4 armed men as one of them was when facing a woman alone. They took off, and we followed them far enough to make sure they were really leaving. Emma felt the last of her fear drain away, leaving her weak and exhausted. "Thank God," she whispered. The other men headed to the bunkhouse, and Jacob followed Emma into the house. In the kitchen, with the lamps lit against the gathering darkness, she suddenly became aware of how close he was standing, of the way he was looking at her. "Emma," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. When I heard you scream today, when I thought someone might be hurting you, I realized something I have been trying not to admit for weeks now." Her heart was pounding again, but for a completely different reason. "What did you realize?" That I have feelings for you, strong feelings. Not as my employee or even just as a friend, but as a woman I care about deeply. Maybe love, though it has been so long since I felt it that I am not sure I would recognize it anymore." He paused, searching her face. "I know I said this would be strictly professional. I know you are in a position where you depend on me for your livelihood. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. And I think maybe you feel something too." Emma's breath caught. This was the moment she had been both hoping for and dreading. "I do," she admitted softly. "I have been trying not to, trying to be sensible and practical. But yes, Jacob, I care for you. Very much." The smile that spread across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. His thumb gently brushed over the bruise on her cheek where the rustler had hit her, and his expression darkened briefly. "I am going to kiss you now," he said, his voice low and intense. "If that is not what you want, tell me and I will stop." Instead of answering with words, Emma rose up on her toes and closed the distance between them. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that made her head spin. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, losing herself in the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for so long," he murmured. "So have I," Emma admitted. "But Jacob, what does this mean? Where do we go from here?" "I do not know," he said honestly. "All I know is that I do not want to lose you, not as my housekeeper, and certainly not as whatever we are becoming to each other. We will figure it out together if you are willing." "I am willing," Emma said, and knew she meant it with her whole heart. The next few weeks were a time of discovery and joy such as Emma had never known. She continued her work running the household, but now there was a new dimension to her relationship with Jacob. He courted her properly, respectfully, always mindful of her reputation, and the fact that they lived under the same roof. They took walks in the evening after dinner, talking and learning about each other in deeper ways. He brought her wildflowers from the range and books from town when he went for supplies. She made his favorite meals and left little surprises for him to find. A fresh shirt carefully mended, his office tidied and organized. The ranch hands, far from disapproving, seemed delighted by the development. Tommy told Emma that Jacob seemed happier than he had been in years. Charlie mentioned that the boss smiled more these days, and that was good to see. One evening in June, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose, Jacob took Emma's hand in his. "I have been thinking," he said, "about us and about the future." "What have you been thinking?" Emma asked, though her heart was already racing with hope. "That I do not want to court you for months and months. I am not a young man anymore, Emma. I am 34 years old, and I have already wasted 2 years since Sarah died just existing without really living. Now that I have found you, now that I know what we could have together, I do not want to wait." He turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. "Emma Kate Kensington, I know this is probably too soon. I know we have only known each other for 3 months. But I am sure of what I feel, and I think you are sure too. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, not just in name but in truth? Will you help me build a life here, raise children if God blesses us with them, grow old together in this hard, beautiful land?" Tears sprang to Emma's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Jacob, I will marry you. I love you." "I love you too," he said, and kissed her sweetly, tenderly, sealing their promise under the vast New Mexico sky. They were married 3 weeks later in Lincoln, in the small church at the edge of town. Emma wore a new dress that she had sewn herself from beautiful blue fabric that Jacob had insisted on buying. Jacob wore his best suit, looking handsome and solemn as he spoke his vows. The ranch hands attended, along with Mrs. Chen from the boarding house, the cook from the saloon who had first told Emma about Jacob, and a few other people from town who knew and respected the Fletcher name. After the ceremony, there was a simple celebration at the hotel restaurant where Jacob had first given Emma a meal. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been a few months. As Emma looked around at the friendly faces, at the man who was now her husband, at the new life stretching out before her, she could hardly believe how dramatically her circumstances had changed. They returned to the ranch that evening as husband and wife. Jacob carried Emma over the threshold, making her laugh with the traditional gesture. Inside, the house that she had worked so hard to restore now truly belonged to her. It was her home, not just her workplace. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Jacob loved her with a tenderness and passion that took her breath away. He was patient and gentle, knowing this was her first time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And Emma discovered that the love she felt for him only deepened with this new intimacy, this physical expression of their emotional bond. The summer passed in a golden haze of happiness. Emma settled fully into her role as Jacob's wife and the mistress of the ranch. She expanded her garden, traded with neighboring ranches for chickens and ducks, even got a milk cow that she named Daisy. She and Jacob worked side by side, he handling the cattle and horses, she managing the household and helping with record-keeping and accounts. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch, talking about their day, making plans for the future. By September, Emma began to suspect that she might be pregnant. When she was sure, she told Jacob one evening after dinner. The look of joy on his face was something she would treasure forever. "A baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Emma asked, though she could already see the answer. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You have given me so much, Emma. Hope, love, a reason to look forward instead of back, and now a child. I could not ask for anything more." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Emma continued her work as long as she could, though Jacob and the ranch hands began to insist she do less of the heavy labor. By midwinter, she was quite obviously expecting, and Jacob had become almost comically protective, worrying about everything from whether she was warm enough to whether she was eating properly. On a cold February morning in 1880, Emma went into labor. Jacob rode to town for the doctor while Charlie stayed with her, keeping her calm and comfortable. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Emma feared something was going wrong. But finally, as the sun was setting, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a full head of dark hair and his father's brown eyes. "He is perfect," Jacob said, holding his son for the first time with tears running down his face. "Absolutely perfect." They named him James after Jacob's father. As Emma lay in bed, exhausted but happy, watching her husband cradling their newborn son, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Less than a year ago, she had been begging for scraps behind a saloon, desperate and alone. Now she had a husband who loved her, a baby son, a home that was truly hers, and a future that looked bright with promise. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked softly, coming to sit beside her on the bed with the baby. "About how much can change in a year," Emma said. "About how you saved my life that day in Lincoln." "You saved mine too," Jacob replied. "I was just going through the motions before you came, Emma. You reminded me how to live again, how to love again. You brought light back into this house and into my heart." She reached up to touch his face, this good man who had given her everything when she had nothing. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," he replied. "Both of you, my family." Little James grew strong and healthy, a happy baby who seemed to thrive on the ranch life. Emma proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving but also practical, not letting worry consume her. Jacob was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, teaching him about horses and cattle even when the boy was too young to understand. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. The ranch prospered under their combined management. They added more land, built a new barn, expanded the herd. Emma's garden grew every year, producing enough vegetables to feed the household and trade with neighbors. She and Jacob became pillars of the small community, known for their fairness and generosity. When James was 3, Emma became pregnant again. This time she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Jacob's first wife. It was Emma's idea, a gesture of respect for the woman who had come before her. Jacob was touched by her thoughtfulness. "She would have liked you," he told Emma, holding their newborn daughter. "Sarah would have been glad that I found happiness again, and she would have loved you for making me happy." 2 years later, another son arrived whom they named Thomas. Then, when Emma was 30, their last child was born, another daughter they called Grace. 4 children, a thriving ranch, a marriage built on love and respect and shared effort. It was more than Emma had ever dared to dream of during those dark days when she had been alone and desperate. The years continued to roll by. The children grew, learning to ride and work the ranch alongside their parents. James showed a natural talent for working with horses, just like his father. Sarah was quiet and thoughtful, always reading when she could, reminding Emma of her own father, the schoolteacher. Thomas was adventurous and bold, keeping them all on their toes. And Grace, the baby, was affectionate and charming, able to wrap everyone around her little finger. Through it all, Emma and Jacob's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, of course, their moments of frustration and conflict as any married couple does. But they had learned to talk things through, to compromise, to remember that they were partners in this life they had built together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jacob took Emma back to Lincoln for a rare night away from the ranch. The children were old enough now that the older ones could help watch the younger ones, with Charlie and the other ranch hands keeping an eye on everyone. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, the same place where Jacob had bought Emma her first real meal a decade earlier. Sitting across from her husband, Emma remembered that day with vivid clarity. The hunger, the desperation, the shame of accepting his charity. And then the gratitude, the hope, the first stirrings of feelings that would grow into love. "What are you smiling about?" Jacob asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I was remembering the first time we ate here," Emma said. "Do you remember? You bought me dinner and offered me a job, all in the same breath. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even half-starved and covered in dust," Jacob said. "And I remember thinking I was crazy for bringing home a complete stranger to live in my house. But I could not just walk away from you, Emma. Something told me you were meant to be in my life. Fate," Emma said softly, "or providence, or maybe just dumb luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every day," Jacob said seriously. "You are my best friend, Emma. My partner, my love, the mother of my children. You are everything to me." "And you are everything to me," Emma replied, squeezing his hand. "You gave me a life when I had nothing. You gave me hope and love and a family. I could not have asked for more." They walked through the town after dinner, hand in hand under the stars. Lincoln had grown over the years, become more settled and civilized, but it still had that frontier edge, that sense of being on the border between the old wild ways and the new ordered future. You ever miss Missouri? Jacob asked as they walked. Your old life, Emma considered the question. I miss my parents sometimes, wish they could have known you and met their grandchildren, but miss that life. No. This is my home now, Jacob, here with you with our children on the ranch. This is where I belong. They stood together looking up at the vast New Mexico sky, filled with more stars than Emma had ever seen back in Missouri. The desert air was cool and clean, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. It was a hard land still, unforgiving to those who could not adapt, but Emma had adapted. She had not just survived here, she had thrived, building a life richer and fuller than anything she had imagined in her youth. Come on, Jacob said, tugging her hand. Let us go back to the hotel. I got us a room for the night, and I plan to make the most of having you all to myself for once. Emma laughed, feeling young and carefree despite the 10 years and 4 children. Lead the way, husband. That night in the quiet hotel room, they made love with the comfortable passion of long married partners who still desired each other deeply. And afterward, lying in Jacob's arms, Emma felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Jacob replied, holding her close. Forever and always. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. There were hard seasons when the cattle market was poor, and they had to tighten their belts. There was the year of drought that tested their resources and resolve. There was the winter when Grace got pneumonia, and they almost lost her, spending agonizing days and nights at her bedside until the fever finally broke. There were the normal struggles of raising children, dealing with adolescent moods and childish squabbles, and the thousand small crises of family life. But there were far more good times than bad. There were roundups and brandings, Christmas celebrations and summer picnics, birthdays and anniversaries. There were quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sunset with Jacob while the children played in the yard. There were Sunday dinners with the whole family gathered around the big table, laughing and talking and enjoying each other's company. James grew into a fine young man, skilled with horses and cattle, serious and responsible like his father. When he was 21, he married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a sweet-natured young woman named Mary who fit into the Fletcher family as though she had always belonged. They built a small house on the north section of the ranch, and soon Emma had grandchildren to spoil. Sarah, true to her thoughtful nature, became a teacher, taking over the small school that had been established in Lincoln. She never married, claiming she was happy with her independence and her work, and Emma and Jacob learned to accept that some people found fulfillment in ways other than traditional family life. Thomas, the adventurous one, left home at 18 to try his hand at cowboying on the big ranches in Texas. He came back 2 years later with stories that made everyone laugh and shake their heads, then settled down to help run the Fletcher Ranch with a new maturity and purpose. Grace, the baby of the family, stayed close to home longest, helping her mother run the household and learning everything Emma could teach her about managing a ranch home. When she was 19, she fell in love with a young lawyer who had set up practice in Lincoln, and Emma planned a beautiful wedding that the whole territory seemed to attend. As Emma entered her 40s and then her 50s, she watched with satisfaction as the legacy she and Jacob had built continued to grow. The ranch was solid and prosperous, known throughout the territory as one of the best-run operations. Their children were settled and happy, building their own lives while remaining close to family. And through it all, she and Jacob remained devoted to each other, their love tested by time and proven strong. On a warm evening in June of 1905, Emma and Jacob sat together on the porch as they had so many times before. They were both in their 50s now, their hair gray and their faces weathered by decades under the New Mexico sun. But they still sat close together, still held hands, still found comfort in each other's presence. 25 years, Jacob said, looking out over the ranch that had been their whole world for so long. Hard to believe it has been that long since I found you begging for scraps behind that saloon in Lincoln. I was not begging, Emma protested with a smile. I was hoping for scraps. There is a difference. Is there? Jacob teased, the same spark of humor in his eyes that had first attracted her all those years ago. A subtle but important one, Emma insisted, then grew more serious. But you are right, it has been 25 years, and what years they have been. 4 children, 3 grandchildren so far, a ranch that has exceeded our wildest dreams. We built something good here, Jacob, something lasting. We did, he agreed. And we are not done yet. God willing, we have many more years ahead of us. More grandchildren to spoil, more sunsets to watch, more life to live together. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, as steady and dependable as the land beneath their feet. I would not change a single thing, she said softly. Not one moment, not one choice. It all led me here to this life with you. Even the hard times, even the scary times when I did not know how I would survive, it was all worth it because it brought me to you. I feel the same way, Jacob said, pressing a kiss to her hair. You saved me, Emma. I was lost after Sarah died, just drifting through my days. Then you came along, all fierce determination and hidden vulnerability, and you woke me up again. You reminded me what it meant to live, not just exist. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and gold. The cattle were settling down for the night, and smoke rose from the chimney of James and Mary's house in the distance. Everything was peaceful. Everything was right. Do you remember what I said to you that first day? Jacob asked. When I invited you to have dinner with me at the hotel, you said your mother raised you to have better manners than to eat in front of a starving woman, Emma recalled with a smile. I said I could not discuss the job while you were about to fall over from hunger, Jacob corrected gently. But what I was thinking, what I did not say, was that I could not walk away from you. Something inside me, some instinct or intuition, told me that you were important, that you were going to change my life. And did I? Emma asked, though she knew the answer. Every day, Jacob said simply. Every single day since then has been better because you were in it. You are my heart, Emma, my home, my everything. Tears pricked Emma's eyes, but they were happy tears. And you are mine, she whispered, always and forever. As the last light faded and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Emma thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment, the grief and loss that had sent her west, the desperation that had brought her so low, the courage it had taken to approach Jacob Fletcher that day in Lincoln and ask for a chance, the leap of faith they had both taken when they opened their hearts to love again. It had all been worth it. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear or doubt. Because it had led her here, to this life, to this love, to this man who held her close as darkness fell over their ranch. Years continued to roll by in a steady, comfortable rhythm. Emma and Jacob grew older together, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work but their spirits still strong. They watched their children become parents themselves, bringing a new generation into the world. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, danced at weddings and comforted at funerals, lived the full cycle of life that makes up a family's history. When Emma was 60, she finally convinced Jacob to take a trip back to Missouri. They traveled by train now, so different from the arduous journey that had brought her west all those years ago. She showed him the town where she had grown up, visited her parents' graves, walked the streets of her childhood. It was bittersweet, seeing how much had changed and how much remained the same, but mostly it confirmed what she had told Jacob years earlier. Missouri was her past, but New Mexico was her home. The ranch, the land, the family they had built together, that was where she belonged. They returned to the ranch with relief, glad to be back where they belonged. Jacob joked that he was too old now for long trips, and Emma had to agree. They were content to stay put, to let the world come to them rather than going out to chase it. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. James and Mary brought their 4 children, including the oldest who was already 16, and talking about taking over the ranch someday. Sarah came from town with gifts and stories about her students. Thomas and his wife brought their 3 wild boys who kept everyone laughing. Grace arrived with her husband, the lawyer, and their 2 daughters, both of whom were already showing signs of being as charming as their mother. The house that Emma had cleaned and restored so many years ago was filled with noise and laughter and love. Children ran through the rooms where she had once worked alone. The kitchen that had been her domain was now crowded with daughters and daughters-in-law helping prepare the massive feast. The table where she had served that first meal to Jacob and the ranch hands was extended to its full length, barely long enough to seat everyone. After dinner, after the cake and presents and speeches, Emma found herself standing on the porch with Jacob, looking out over the ranch in the twilight. Inside, the family was still celebrating, but they had slipped away for a moment of quiet together. 30 years, Emma said, echoing what Jacob had said 5 years earlier. Who would have believed it? I would have, Jacob said firmly. From the moment you agreed to marry me, I knew we would make it. We were meant to be together, Emma. Some things are just fate. I used to think fate was a cruel thing, Emma admitted. When my parents died, when I came west and found my cousin gone, when I was alone and desperate with nowhere to turn, I thought fate had abandoned me. But it had not, Jacob said. It was bringing you to me. A hard road, maybe, but one that led to where you needed to be. Emma considered that, thinking about the young woman she had been at 22, begging for scraps behind a saloon. That woman had been broken and desperate, sure that her life was over before it had really begun. She could not have imagined the future that awaited her. The love, the family, the home, the life that would exceed her wildest dreams. You are right, she said finally. It was all leading here to this life with you, and I would do it all again, every hard moment, if I knew it would bring me back to you. Jacob pulled her close, and they stood together watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that had witnessed their wedding, their children's births, every triumph and tragedy of their years together. The stars that would keep shining long after they were gone, watching over the land and the family they had built. I love you, Emma Fletcher, Jacob said quietly. I loved you that first day when you were too proud to admit you needed help. I loved you when you agreed to work for me, when you brought life back to this house, when you agreed to marry me. I loved you through every birth and every sleepless night, every struggle and every joy, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion. You gave me everything, Jacob, not just a job or a home, but a reason to live. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You gave me a seat at your table when I was begging for scraps. You made me your wife, the mother of your children, your partner in every way. You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. They kissed then, a sweet, tender kiss that held 30 years of love and commitment. Inside, someone started playing the piano, probably Grace, and voices joined in song. Their family, their legacy, celebrating together in the home that Emma had made warm and welcoming so many years ago. As they stood together on the porch, Emma felt a sense of completeness, of a story well told and a life well lived. There would be more years ahead, she hoped, more moments to treasure and memories to make. But even if there were not, even if this was all they got, it was enough. More than enough. She had started with nothing, with less than nothing. And she had built a kingdom, not of wealth or power, but of love and family and belonging. She had taken scraps and transformed them into a feast. She had taken desperation and turned it into hope. She had taken a broken heart and found healing in the strong, steady love of a good man. The years that followed were gentle ones. Emma and Jacob grew older with grace, watching their grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the family. The ranch remained strong under James's management, with Thomas helping and the next generation learning the trade. The Fletcher name was respected throughout the territory, synonymous with hard work, fair dealing, and family values. Emma's health remained good until she was in her late 60s, when her joints began to ache with arthritis, and her energy was not what it once had been. But she still tended her garden in the warm months, still cooked Sunday dinners for whoever could make it home, still sat on the porch with Jacob in the evenings, holding his hand and counting her blessings. Jacob, too, showed his age, moving more slowly, his face lined with the years. But his eyes still held that warm intelligence that had first attracted her, and his love for her never wavered. They had become one of those old couples who finish each other's sentences, who communicate with looks and gentle touches, who have grown so intertwined over the decades that it is hard to imagine one without the other. On a cool evening in autumn of 1915, as they sat together watching the sun set, Emma felt a deep contentment settle over her. She was 73 years old now, and Jacob was 75. They had been married for 35 years, and she had lived at the ranch for nearly 36. More than half her life, the better half, had been spent here with him. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked, as he so often did. "About how lucky I am," Emma said simply. "About how a woman who once begged for scraps ended up with a feast. About how the worst day of my life led directly to the best days of my life." "I am the lucky one," Jacob insisted, as he always did when she said such things. "I was half alive when you came along, Emma. You brought me back to life, gave me a reason to wake up in the morning, to plan for the future, to hope again. You gave me 4 beautiful children, a home full of love and laughter, and more happiness than any man deserves." "We gave those things to each other," Emma corrected gently. "It was never just one of us, Jacob. It was always both of us, together, building this life." "Together," Jacob agreed, squeezing her hand. "Always together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The ranch was quiet now, the cattle settled, the horses dozing in the corral. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes from a day's work well done and a life well lived. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Emma leaned her head on Jacob's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, still strong after all these years. She thought about that young woman who had stood behind a saloon, desperate and afraid, wondering how she would survive another day. She wished she could go back and tell that woman not to lose hope, that help was coming, that a tall rancher with kind eyes was about to change her life forever. But perhaps it was better not to know the future, Emma reflected. Perhaps the joy was sweeter because it came after such darkness. Perhaps she appreciated what she had because she knew so viscerally what it was like to have nothing. Perhaps the feast tasted better because she remembered the hunger. "Time to go in," Jacob said eventually, as the night grew cooler. "Do not want you catching a chill." Emma let him help her to her feet, her joints protesting the movement. But Jacob's hand was steady and strong, supporting her as he had supported her for over 3 decades. Together they walked inside to the house that was home to the life they had built, to the love that had sustained them through everything. That night, lying in bed with Jacob's arm around her, Emma said a prayer of thanksgiving for the journey that had brought her here, for the losses that had sent her west, for the desperation that had brought her low enough to ask for help, for the rancher who had given her not just a meal but a chance, for the love that had grown between them, steady and sure, for the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who were their legacy, for every moment of the life they had shared. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, though whether she was talking to God or to Jacob or to fate itself, she could not say. "Thank you," Jacob whispered back, and she knew he was talking to her. Emma Kate Fletcher, born Kensington, fell asleep that night with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. She had been given a seat at the table, and she had made the most of it. She had taken the scraps of her broken life and created something beautiful and lasting. She had loved and been loved in return. And that, she thought as sleep claimed her, was more than enough. It was everything. The end.